The Polsky Practical Personal Enrichment Series is underwritten by the Polsky Family Supporting Foundation in partnership with the Johnson County Community College Foundation, which seeks to educate and empower the public in the areas of health, financial independence, and topical issues not covered elsewhere.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, we're going to go ahead and begin our program. If I could please ask everybody to rise to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, and welcome to Johnson County Community College, and welcome to Yardley Hall. My name is John Bolander. I'm the Veteran Services Outreach Assistant here at Johnson County Community College, and an Air Force veteran myself. It is our pleasure to have you here with us for tonight's Polsky Practical Personal Enrichment Series lecture, featuring our panel of veterans who are going to talk to you about their military service, their experiences, and the Latino perspective. The Polsky Practical Personal Enrichment Series was established in 1997 and is underwritten by the Norman and Elaine Polsky Family Supporting Foundation in partnership with the Johnson County Community College Foundation. The series seeks to educate and empower the public in the areas of education, health and wellness, financial stability, and other issues not covered elsewhere. We are very honored to have several members of the Polsky family who have joined us tonight are seated there in the middle of the auditorium. Let's give them a hand for the wonderful support. Before I introduce our moderator, I want to tell you what is in your packet. There's a green card, which is for your feedback. We are always planning future Polsky events, and we want to hear from you. Let us know how we're doing and what topics or speakers you'd enjoy seeing as part of the Polsky series. Also on the green card, we hope you will provide your email address and other contact information so we may keep them informed or keep you informed of future Polsky series events. You may also email us at polskyseries@jccc.edu to join our list. The blue card in your packet is for questions. After tonight's presentation, our moderator will ask the questions that you submit to the panel. That's what the blue card's for. So as you're listening to the program, if you think of a question, please write it down on the blue card and hand it to an usher. We'll get it up here to our moderator, and he will present the questions to the veterans. Also in your packet are flyers about upcoming Polsky series events in 2014. On January 29th, we'll feature a financial outlook and investing presentation by financial advisor Tim Carlin, himself a veteran and a graduate of West Point. And on March 27th, Adam Stelzner, lead engineer of NASA's Mars rover project, Curiosity, will be here to present how Curiosity changed my life. Please check our website for details and updates on these events. You can find us at www.jccc.edu/Polsky series. That is also the place where you can watch videos of previous Polsky series events. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator. I'll bring him out here, James Madril. James Madril was born to a family filled with military tradition. His father served in the Navy with his two brothers. His mother's 5 brothers all served in the Army during the Korean War. James enlisted in the United States Navy in 1984. Following boot camp, where he was selected for the Drum and Bugle Company, and then continued his training through the Navy's rigorous Accelerated Officer Selection Program, broadened opportunity for officer selection and training, also known as BOOST. Mr. Madril was awarded an NROTC scholarship to the University of Kansas, where he completed his bachelor's degree and earned his fleet commission as a naval ensign in 1990. Mr. Madril served aboard the USS Forrestal, CV-59, and the USS Constellation, CV-62, completing tours in the deck, engineering, auxiliaries, and communications departments. James is now employed by the state of Kansas as a Veterans Employment Representative, representing disabled veterans with their outreach program in the Johnson County office. When he is not helping veterans find employment, he facilitates the Veterans Introduction Program and the Veterans Resume workshops at the Johnson County Workforce Partnership Office. Please help me welcome James Madril.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending. We're honored tonight with some very special persons that have served in the military. They're Hispanic, and they're like brothers to me, just as much as anybody else who served in the military in all branches are. They're brothers and sisters. First, I'd like to introduce Rocky Rojas. Rocky was born and raised in the Amunet district of Kansas City, and he served in the U.S. Army during World War II. His service included action in North Africa and Italy with the 135th Infantry Regiment, 34th Division, from March 1943 to October 1945. Mr. Rojas is proud to have served in the infantry in the 34th Division, in which he served. He has the record for the most days in combat during World War II, 600 days. Over the years, Mr. Rojas was given much of his time serving in various military veteran organizations. He was also awarded the lifetime member of the 34th Infantry Division Association, the bearer of a lifetime membership of this famous 34th Infantry Division Association. This division of the World War II has a distinction of being not only the first to land in the European theater, but also had more days in combat, over 600, than any other accredited, with capturing more than 40,000 prisoners during that time. The 34th ranks second to none and stands high on its scroll of honor among the greatest fighting units that had ever carried the Stars and Stripes into battle. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Rocky Rojas. Next to Rocky is his son, Rocky Jr. Rocky grew up here in Kansas City, Kansas. And on January 10th, 1969, he joined the United States Navy. He spent 3 years during the Vietnam War. He was a bosun's mate, and in that capacity, he helped repair the small fighting craft that went up and down the peninsulas and the rivers there during Vietnam. That was they were called the Brown Water Navy. After he was separated from the United States Navy, he joined the railroad and spent 35 years with Burlington Northern and Santa Fe here in the Kansas City district as a track supervisor. And I'd like to introduce Rocky Rojas Jr. Also on the panel, we have Rudy Padilla. Rudy was born and raised in Bonner Springs, Kansas, until the age of 12, when his family settled in Kansas City, Kansas. After graduating from high school, he worked for the federal government and decided to join the United States Navy at the age of 20. Mr. Padilla served in the United States Navy from 1960 to 1963, where he was assigned to the Naval Aviation Field on the East Coast. 5 of the 6 sons in the Padilla family also served honorably in the United States military. Mr. Padilla retired from the U.S. Department of Agriculture as a computer specialist. Allow me to introduce Mr. Padilla. At this time, I'd like to take this opportunity to inform you that because Mr. Rojas had recently suffered a stroke, we are going to take a full advantage of a short video that he had made prior to this, in which he's going to discuss some of the same topics that we're going to discuss tonight. So at this time, I'd like for us to watch this video, take into consideration that it was recorded just a few years ago.
My name is Roque Rojas. It's R-O-Q-U-E, and when I went into the service in basic training, they could not pronounce my name. They chopped it all up. And one fellow came up and he hollered, "Rocky." I said, "That's it." Immediately I thought, that's what I will go by. And from that point on, I was called Rocky. I don't talk too much about it, except the places that I was at, like Algiers and not Casino, but Kasserine Pass, Hill 609 in North Africa. And we went all through North Africa. And then from there, we took training, what do they call that, landing on an LST after North Africa. And we went around, and then that's when we went into Salerno, Italy. And from then Salerno, it was one mountain after another was on the North Apennines. And it was quite a thing. People say, "Man, it's kind of high up here." I said, "You guys don't know what high is." My squad, my company, was up on the next mountain, and there was just a little draw between that and the monastery. So the B-24s came by right overhead of us, and we saw the first bombs come down, and they hit, and then all we could see was just explosion and nothing but dust and smoke. And after they left, right after they left, they gave us the order to attack. And would you believe that the Germans came out of the rocks and stopped us? And but they were well fortified. So we came back, and you might say we scouted. We went out as scouts, and pretty soon they gave the order to the artillery that they was going to do an artillery barrage, and we was going to follow right behind it. Well, they started at the base of the mountain with artillery, and they worked up bombing, and we went right behind them. And you know that they came back out of the rocks and stopped us again. So we came back, and then they gave us the order to go around, and we went to Anzio, and we landed at Anzio. That was behind enemy lines. And that's when we drove them back out of the mountains. The foxhole we dug, we carried shovels on our backpacks, and we dug them just low enough where we could just get below the surface of the ground, and the dirt would pile up towards the enemy lines, and that's what we had. And we made the foxhole just a hair longer than we were, and that's where we did our thing. I think I think you understand what I'm trying to say. Somebody mentioned toilet paper, and I told myself we carried ours in our helmets. And then when we went out on combat, we'd take a piece of toilet paper and put it on the back of our helmet, and the guy behind me couldn't see us because it was so dark, but they could see the white of the toilet paper, and that's how we guided ourselves. And we went into this one town. I forget what the name of the town is, but it was late at night, and we went into this house to see if there was any. Of course, the Italians, they had found refuge in caves and stuff, so the house was empty. So the surgeon said, "We're going to stay here for a couple of hours, so find yourself a place to lay down and rest." I said, "I'll go out and scout, and I'll come back." Well, I found my place. I had laid my gun, my M1, on a corner by the wall in my pack. The sergeant walked in. He said, "Whose stuff is that over there?" And we looked around and said, "Oh, that's mine. That's where I'm going to lay down." I said, "No, you're not. That's where I'm going to lay. Go get your stuff. Find another place." So I did. And later on at night, just before daylight, we got an artillery barrage come in. And those houses in Italy are made of stone. They just pile a stone on top of one another, and because that's all they had. Well, anyhow, a shell hit on top of the wall, and a big stone came down and hit our sergeant on the side of the head. And well, needless to say, he died before he got to the aid station. That could have been me. Coming back, I got off the bus in here in Kansas City, and before I waited for the streetcar on 7th Street, 7th and Kansas Avenue in Armadale, I thought I'm going to go into and get me a cup of coffee and a roll. And of course I had all my well, I'd say my medals and everything on, and I went into the restaurant, and the lady that was there, the waitress, she looked at me and she said, "We don't serve Mexicans." Now, I didn't say a word. I just turned around, walked out, came on, and walked down Kansas from 7th and Kansas Avenue towards 5th Street and Kansas Avenue. And there I met a man coming towards me, and that was my welcoming committee. Nobody else. That's the only person that I saw. Until I got home and my dad was standing outside. He looked at me, and he didn't say a word. He said, "Your mother's inside." Sorry. Anyhow, she didn't say anything. She just looked at me. And that was it. But after over 600 days of combat, I got used to things. As far as the things that have happened, the incidents that have happened as far as discrimination, I just pass it on by anymore. I don't even think about it too much. I had about 5 interviews from 5 Italian newspapers came over and interviewed me, and I said, and I told them, I said, "You're telling us that you're our hero." I said, no, I'm no hero. I said, "Heroes are the one that never got back home." I said, "Those are your heroes." I said, "I'm one of the fortunate ones." I do not use the word luck. I use the word fortunate. I said, "I'm one of the fortunate that went back home." Above everything, I always say the Lord watched over me all the time that I was there. And that's the reason that I'm talking to you right now, because He's the one that has been watching over me. I thank Him day and night, and I never failed to do so.
Thank you for your words. I appreciate that. We're going to approach tonight the way my family usually gathers around to talk. A lot of Hispanic families are very close, and there's a lot of times when you have a lot of generations sitting in a room, talking, sharing knowledge. So we're going to approach that method tonight with these fine gentlemen here. And just as an overview, these are the kind of the topics that we're going to talk about, and I take your pleasure in allowing me to read this. First, we're going to talk about family values and traditions, how we grew up, what we grew up with, and compare them into military and the military core values and their traditions. We'll also talk about serving enlisted, serving as an officer, because we have both represented up here today. We'll talk about the difference between peacetime and wartime. We'll also talk about advancements and promotions within the military and how it compared to after the military. And lastly, we'll talk about any kind of advice that we can provide to you in the audience, as well as answer your audience questions. So please take the time to fill out the questions on the forms, and we'll be more than happy to answer those. So I'm going to open this discussion up to the gentleman here. I know in my family values was huge. yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, thank you, please. And growing up in southern Alabama, as I did, it was kind of reinforced, if you will, for if it was forgotten about. I would like for you guys to identify the family values that you grew up with and how it impacted or influenced your actions in the military, and if it both complemented or conflicted with the military.
Well, as far as family values concerned, yes, I was instilled with that. There was no way of saying, no, Dad, I'm not doing that. It was, yes, sir. And that was, and you learned that was the only answer. Yes, yes, sir, yes, sir. And in the military, well, naturally you have to go with the same concept. You know, they tell you that an order, and that's what you have to follow. And, you know, you have to obey. That's part of the military life. And, you know, that definitely helped there during training, boot camp or whatever, where they, yes, sir, and follow directions. And that's part of the family value that was instilled in me.
Yes, you know, I know exactly what he's talking about, and of course, you know, when you grow up in, most likely the parents are especially the mom, very religious, and you go to church and mass on Sundays, but in addition to that, my dad was, to him, loyalty was very important. If a person is your friend or family, I mean, you do whatever you can for that person. You don't tell them no. So anyway, I believe loyalty, and of course that transfers to the military. Loyalty is mandatory. So that is something that you know you're very comfortable with. You know that you have a job to do. You're loyal to your members in your squad or whatever. So I believe loyalty is a big qualifier for me.
Yeah, I'd also like to add on there about the aspect that you mentioned about religion. You know, in Hispanic families, religion, regardless of what religion it is, it's very strong, very traditional. Sunday mornings, church on special days and everything. I found myself in boot camp. I was one of the religious petty officers in the Navy myself while I was helping out there. And I found that while the military can be a distractor or can teach some bad habits, I've seen too that also the positiveness come out of it as well. You know, reinforcing the religious aspect of it or the loyalty and so on. I agree with it. I agree with you guys. Thank you very much. Rudy, were you an officer or enlisted?
No, I was enlisted. When I was growing up, I was probably 4 or 5 years old when World War II ended, and I vividly remember how the joy and everyone had when World War II was declared over. And we lived on the edge of the city limits of Bonner Springs, Kansas, and these buses driving by full of soldiers and people on the streets waving, and I just remember that. And then when Korean War broke out, my 2 brothers in the Army, they were part of that, and I just knew that one day I wanted to be part of the military. I just waited a little bit longer than I wanted to, as most Hispanic families. Finances were a problem, so I decided after high school to work to help my family. And but when I was over 20 and a half, I had a good job with the post office, and it was mid-November, and I thought, I'm 20 years old, and I felt I was getting old, and I thought, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go now. So I went with the idea of joining the Army. But I joined the Navy, and it turned out to be a good choice. I had a really good duty, good teammates. I mean, everyone that I was assigned with, you know, we got along very well. And but anyway, I was ready to leave in mid-November, and I live in the Kansas City area, and I thought, well, this is going to work out very well. Mid-November, and I will spend boot camp in sunny San Diego for the winter. But, I didn't realize they had boot camp also in Great Lakes, Illinois. And that's where I ended up, from mid-November till end of February. So, but it was it was a good experience, and I met I was able to meet a lot of people from the New York City area, Philadelphia, Boston, and that was quite an experience. Learning different people accents and their way of speaking, and of course people from the East Coast, from the Northeast, they had never known a Mexican American, so they were just so surprised that I could even speak English. It really was. They were very, and they wondered, what I was doing in Kansas, why wasn't I in Texas or Mexico? But anyway, we got along very well.
Did you happen to see, in your tour of duty, did you happen to see any Hispanic officers?
I did not. I was stationed on the East Coast, and for whatever reason, I did not have any Hispanic officers, and I rarely ever met Hispanic sailors. I was stationed on Norfolk Naval Air Station, and rarely ever I would come across a Hispanic, and I'm still not sure why. Probably they were on ships, and I wasn't. I wanted a ship, but I was on the Naval Air Station, which was very good duty, by the way.
And Rocky Jr.?
There was no Hispanic officers. There was, when I was on board, I didn't see very many Hispanics. I did meet a couple one time when I was in Japan for R&R, but I had the fortune of a friend of mine joined the Navy with me, and he was Hispanic, and we still got duty stationed together and went to Vietnam together and got out at the same time. But basically, no, we didn't have any Hispanic other than myself and him.
I think that was called back then the buddy program.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And both of you served doing the same thing?
Right. Well, he went to the gunner's mate force, and I was, like I said, deckhand, and then from there I went to signal department. But most of the time was in deck force or boatswain mate, driving patrol boats or sometimes, and I also I ran the winch that picked up the actual river boats that were blown up and set them on barges so they could work on them.
So very, very rarely did you happen to see either another fellow Hispanic enlisted?
Very rarely, yeah.
Very rarely. When I went through, it was in the mid-'80s, and there were only 2 others in boot camp. And now there was 9 companies during that boot camp, and the others were in different companies. I was the only Hispanic in my boot camp company myself. There was one other Hispanic Latino person in college when I went to ROTC to become an officer, and I was the only Hispanic officer on the ship that I was on the USS Forrestal.
Well, when I joined, like I said, we wanted the buddy plan. I went to the recruiting office and joined, and they told me, well, in order for you to join, my father and my mother are both American citizens. They were born here. I just happened to be born in Mexico, and I had to denounce my citizenship from Mexico in order to join the military, which was fine. That was American all the way anyway, and a lot of people wanted to say, well, how come you don't have an accent? I said, well, I was born here. I mean, I was living here all my life, and I don't have an accent.
Yeah. The accent that I had was a Southern accent because I grew up in Alabama, so that was kind of a strange thing to run by. My family sure gave me a lot of grief about that. But I, too, had run into a lot of the stereotypes that happened. Fortunately, I did go to boot camp in San Diego. And, here, yeah. Unfortunately, it was during summertime, so I really tanned up good. And you could definitely see, the tan lines from wearing the hat all the time and everything. But my favorite aspect, though, was that in the boot camp company, we were all treated the same. It didn't matter whether it was Hispanic, right, Latino, or African American or what. Everybody got yelled at. Everybody had their racks turned over. Everybody had you know, something to be chewed out about. And so
Everybody did the push-ups.
everybody did the push-ups. So it really brought a commonality to the team, a cohesiveness to the team. And I was wondering if you guys had seen that too while you were in boot camp and then later on.
Now, we pretty much seemed equal then, like I say, but I was the only, well, a friend of mine and I were the only Hispanics in our boot camp, and I went to San Diego in January, so it was pretty nice. It got cool at times, but no, we didn't. It was treated pretty fairly, like I say, but didn't have any problems with that.
Did you see the more problems occurring after you separated from the military?
To a small degree, would say a small degree. They worked for the railroad. We had, you know, naturally it was union, so they couldn't actually pick somebody ahead of me if he didn't have the time.
Right.
So I didn't have to encounter that too much.
Good. Rudy, how about yourself after you separated from the military?
Oh, you know, I got into the computer field, and if I wanted to advance on to be a computer programmer, I had to go through a training period of being in the computer room and working all kinds of hours. So I pretty much was just a normal civilian, but you know, it took me a while for me to realize that I actually was not in the service anymore. That was my identity, and I was about to get out, and I really wasn't looking forward to getting out because I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I enjoyed the people who I worked with. But in October, we had what they call the Cuban Missile Crisis, and of course we received telegrams saying no one's getting out, and you know what, that was fine, you know, because that's really where I wanted to be. I wanted to be there in the national crisis, so. Anyway, we weathered that storm thanks to President Kennedy then, and I was still in. I should have been out a couple of months later, and I thought, you know, I really should get back to my normal life. I still had my job waiting for me, and I called personnel, and I said, you know, are you all going to let me out now? I said, I'm past over my contract, and he said, all right, come on down. So I told a friend of mine, you know, take me to the train station, and I went to personnel, and they typed out my check for whatever leave I had left over, and he gave me my DD-214. He said, okay, get out of here. And it's a really strange feeling. And I thought, wow, that was quick. You know, I'd had that identification of being in the Navy, and then all of a sudden I wasn't, and it took me a long time to really feel that, you know, I really wasn't part of that anymore. But you know, like I say, I really admired the people who make the Navy work, and the tradition, and I enjoy that. But you know, of course, we're all affected sooner or later by events. And when the Vietnam War broke out, I didn't realize how bad it was. But in 1966. My cousin, Frankie Sanchez from Dodge City, he was a casualty in Vietnam in February of that year. He was a gunner on a helicopter. And, you know, of course, still, I don't think Vietnam was in the consciousness. We really hadn't heard a lot. But then in 67 or 68, when we really started paying attention to the evening news, and that's when, in 1968, I lost my nephew, in the Marines, and my cousin, also a friend of Roque, his name is Johnny Rojas. He was a Marine, and in September 1968. And so, you know, I have some knowledge of what families go through when they lose a family member. It's very traumatic for the whole family. And I guess. You know, hopefully, you know, that someday we'll find a way where we don't have to lose our young men and young women. But yeah, so then I started getting active in the American GI Forum, and I help in whatever way I can in that way.
Rookie Jr., how did you find transitioning out of the service to be difficult? I mean, you were only in for 3 years, so it's not like somebody who was dealing with a retirement situation. Did you have any difficulty in transitioning?
No, not really. When I got out, I wanted to take a break, so that's basically what I did. And then I started work. Maybe about a year later, I went looking for a job finally, and I worked for Western Electric, and then from there I got laid off, and I said, well, I'm gonna try the railroad, and been there ever since. And you know, with the railroad, there's a lot of Hispanics that worked on the railroad, so it was pretty convenient, kind of. I went in there.
When I separated out from the enlisted ranks before I went into ROTC, there was no program established at the time to help service members transitioning out into the civilian world. But later on, after I served as an officer, the federal government had implemented a program called a Transition Assistance Program, or TAP. And the TAP class was designed to help identify benefits through the VA, also help train them to fill out applications, do a job resume, things of that nature. Unfortunately, it was contracted out to a civilian contractor who was a federal contractor, and the downside of it was that the teachers weren't caring enough for the service members. You could tell it every day that we were in training that they didn't care. The instructors were coming back late from breaks and from lunch break and stuff. And it set a bad precedent, and a lot of the service members stopped coming.
Well, you notice that people talked about World War II, sure. They talked a little bit about the Korean, but they don't say a whole lot about Vietnam War, and they don't talk too much about the Vietnam vet. But you know, we're still out there.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for this, for this college, Johnson County Community College. When I was a few years after I was out, there were no educational benefits from the GI Bill had run out, and then I believe in the early about 1972 or so, then they went ahead and funded the GI Bill again, and I went downtown to the VA, and they told me to come down to take I'm not sure what kind of test you call it, kind of an assessment test to find out what, I guess, where my interests lie. But I received a call a few weeks later and about my tests and my test score. And he said, "You're all over the board." He said, "I don't know where your best interests are." And actually. He actually told me, he said, "I can't recommend you even go to college." This is in 1972. And I'd take a couple courses when I was in Norfolk, Virginia, just to see if I could pass at Old Dominion, and I did. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go to college anyway. So I came out here to Johnson County Community College, and of course it was a lot different then. It was surrounded by pastures and cows and stuff like that. But anyway, I was waiting in line to pay my tuition, and thankfully a person in the office, he looked at me, he knew I was a little bit older. So he asked me, "Come on in here." He said, "Are you a veteran?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Have you spoken with a veteran counselor?" And I said, "No, I have not." And he said, "Come in here." So he had me, he had me to work with someone here, and I ended up getting the benefits, which are very helpful to me because I had a young family then, and I was able to just keep on going. I guess I went 4 years of evening classes here, and finally graduated after 4 years of that. So I'm very thankful for the Johnson County Community College for that, and we were talking, about the Navy, but I think a lot of our Hispanics are in the Army and in the Marines. I know it's, I know whenever, I'm active in veterans, and whenever I meet a new veteran, usually he was in the Army or the Marines, not too many Navy, but But anyway, the Hispanic is well, he's established in all of the branches, and you know, like I told you before we came out, the Hispanic has fought in every war which the United States has been involved, and that includes the Revolutionary War of 1776.
Yeah, I remember you handed me this list, and if I could,
Sure.
I'd like to read this to you. It talks about how our Hispanic roots start from 1492, the arrival of the Europeans, and then the 1500s, beginning of the Mexican people, in 1640 Coronado and Father Padilla, 1620 the arrival of the Mayflower. So the Hispanics were part of everything. 1776, the Revolutionary War. 1812, the Battle of the Alamo in 1836. The U.S.-Mexican War in 1846. The U.S. Civil War in 1861. World War I, 1917. World War II in 1941. Mendez versus Westminster in 1947. We also have the American JF Forum in 1948. Alvin York won the Medal of Honor in 1918, and Medal of Honor winner Jose Lopez in 1944. You have listed on here casualties in Pearl Harbor. I don't know if we've tried doing the research, but there was a snag on the other side of the family. But on the USS Arizona Memorial, there is a Madrid, a John Madrid on there.
Okay.
I don't know if he's related to me or not. We tried locating him, but it's real difficult to find out. So, I mean, Pearl Harbor, there was a lot of Hispanic casualties there. Vietnam, Iraq, the first casualty in Iraq was Jose Gutierrez.
But you know, the reason when I go to make presentations sometimes, you know, the people like Roque who went and fought in World War II, as many as throughout the years, when soldiers go to other countries, they learn a lot. And when our Mexican Americans went to fight in Europe and they were treated like adults, before they went, they were not. The segregated schools, discrimination when it came to jobs. And Roque, when he went to the school in Armadale in Kansas City, Kansas, the Mexican kids sat in the back, and on the playground had a white line, and the Mexican kids could not cross that white line. On the other side of that line was where the playground equipment was. So they had to make as best they could, and when they went and they were treated like adults, they did their job, and when they came back, they were treated as adults. When they came back, they thought, well, surely things will have changed when I come back home, but they had not. They came back to the same discrimination. They could not go into a restaurant. They could not. A barber wouldn't cut their hair if it wasn't Hispanic barber, but. The reason I notated Alvin York from World War I, he did bravery. Just when you win that Medal of Honor, you did something outstanding as a soldier. But Alvin York, he was given ticker tape parades in New York. He was given, I believe, the governor of Tennessee gave him 600 acres because he wanted to be a farmer, and he was a part of all kinds of parades. A movie was made of his life. Jose Lopez, 25 years later, in World War II, actually, as far as eliminating enemy, he eliminated more enemy than Alvin York, and his other feats were just as good. But when Jose Lopez, when he returned to Texas, he couldn't even get served in a restaurant. I mean, that's just the way things were, we had several Hispanic Medal of Honor recipients during World War II, and the same thing. In fact, one of them, he was so tired, and he stopped for a restaurant in Texas, and the owner was going to throw him out. He said, then he got mad. He said, you know, I fought for you, and here you go and you serve me a cup of coffee. And I guess he started a fight, and they called the police and so forth. But Anyway, I guess I hope people are more aware our brave World War II Mexican Americans. They were treated second class when they went in, and they did their job. And we have many Mexican American recipients of Medal of Honor and Silver Stars, and yet when they came back, the things that really had not changed, and. That's when by the way, that's what this hat is, the American GI Forum. Our founder, Dr. Hector Garcia, he was born in a very poor family. He had to learn English, living in southern Texas, mostly Spanish. And but his parents told him, they said, we want you to go to college. No sports. If you're not working, we want you studying. And it worked out very well. He turned out to be an excellent student, and one of the few Mexican-American students in the University of Texas. In fact, he was in medical school. When World War II broke out, he suspended his studies, joined the Army, went to Europe, and was there for a few years. When he returned, he came back with a Silver Star and several campaign medals. And he said, well, things have worked out fairly well for me. I'm going to continue my studies at the University of Texas. Only when he returned to Texas Medical School, they told him, no, we have a quota system here, only 2 Mexicans a year in our medical school, so and we have our quota filled. So anyway, the Catholic Church found him an internship at St. Joseph Hospital in Omaha, Nebraska. So he completed his medical training, and he returned to Corpus Christi. And that's when he realized that the World War II veterans were not getting the equal treatment in as far as medical needs or education. So that's when he decided to start the American GI Forum.
Did you see things improving after the Korean War?
I'm sorry?
Did you see things improving for Hispanics and Latinos after the Korean War?
Yes, one of our members, he grew up in Topeka, a very, very segregated Topeka, and he was in the Korean War. His brother was killed in the Korean War, and he immediately after that he joined, 18 or 19 years old, and he saw a lot of. He was on the front, so he's seen a lot of action. And when he returned to Topeka, his nephew told him, I want to take you to lunch, meet me there in this restaurant, and then we'll go to the Mexican part of town. And he said, I really didn't want to, because I didn't think they were going to let me in there. And he said, they did. I had my uniform on, and the waitress just kept walking right by me. She wouldn't stop, wouldn't even make eye contact. And then he finally, after 20 minutes, he said, could I have a cup of coffee? She said, I'm not going to serve you. He said, what? He said, why not? He said, we don't serve Mexicans here. And of course, he's very shocked, taken aback by all of this. And he said, I just got back, I just returned from Korea, and I about died there, and I can't get a cup of coffee. Well, she said, maybe you're a soldier, but to me, you're just a Mexican. So she wouldn't serve him, and he left, and he thought that she called the police on him, as a matter of fact, because it wasn't too long after he left there, the police arrived. So anyway, that was pretty commonplace, I believe, for a lot of Hispanics in the Midwest, Texas, but a lot of them just didn't want to talk about it. They were not going to let discrimination drag them down. I'm going to adelante.
Roque Jr., would you say that for those of us in the military that separated during the Vietnam War, that it was more anger against the fact that you served as opposed to the Hispanic or Latino culture?
Well,
there was a lot of animosity towards the military during the Vietnam War.
Yes, well, but yeah, it was just mostly directed towards the Vietnam vet. It wasn't really, I never saw it pointed towards me personally, being Mexican. But 69, 72, I think things were starting to straighten up a little bit. I mean, there's still prejudice out there in this world right at this moment, but it was nowhere near as bad as what they had gone through. So I can't really say too much about that because I never really confronted prejudice too much.
Well, let's talk about after the military, in your line of work with the railroad. Did you see that that it hampered you in any way, or were you? I mean, obviously, being union, that was taken into consideration. Was it?
Right. Oh yeah, that was number one priority. For you followed union rules, and they didn't have much choice there. Okay. Union fought pretty good for everybody.
Good. How about yourself, Rudy?
I'm just not sure. Sometimes people conceal their feelings, and you just never know. And for example, when I was after a year or so there, we had people come from other parts of the country or other states, and they really didn't know anything about Mexican Americans. And me and a friend of mine were talking about going out to have chicken at Stroud's, a well-known restaurant, serve good chicken. And this fella, I believe from Topeka, he said, "Chicken? You eat chicken?" I said, "Well, yes." He said, I thought you just eat tacos, And instead of getting mad, I just thought, wow, I'm just going to ignore this guy because I just don't want to have to explain myself. I just do not. But really, I've had a lot of good experiences. I really have, and I've really met some outstanding people. And but that does not say that did not happen to my family. My dad, he was a laborer all of his life, and when I was in the service, he worked for the street department of Kansas City, Kansas. And in the Argentine district, the whole crew stopped for breakfast. They'd been working about 20 hours straight. And the owner of that small restaurant, he said, "Well, I'll serve you all except for the Mexican. If he wants, we'll get him something. He can take something home in a sack. He can have his sack lunch. We'll give him." And fortunately, my dad's supervisor, he stood up and he told this guy what he thought of him, and they all walked out.
That's good. Lastly, I would like to ask you guys for any input that you would provide to the audience here, any kind of suggestions or any kind of advice that you would provide to help them in welcoming home service members, Hispanic or not, African American or not. What kind of advice would you advise them to provide those service members coming back?
Yeah, I think if you get to know people, people appreciate it. For example, in the Johnson County Library, there's a video about 45 minutes long, maybe an hour. It's called Chicanos in Vietnam. I have it at home as part of our American GI Forum library, but it is available in Johnson County, and it describes these 5 friends who grew up in the fields in California, picking asparagus, picking cabbage, picking cucumbers, whatever. And he said when he finished high school, he was starting to get rebellious, and he was starting to drink beer. And his dad told him, "No more." He said, "I want you home. You get a good night's sleep. So you get up early in the morning. You be ready to go to the fields." And this went on just for a couple of nights. And finally, his name is Charlie Trujillo. And Charlie told his dad, "You know what? I'm going to join the Army. That way, we just won't get on each other's nerves." And Charlie, in the video, Charlie's dad says, "He told me I'm going to join the Army," and I knew what Charlie was in for. He said, "I was in World War II," and sure enough, Charlie Trujillo, he said, "It wasn't too long when I was in Vietnam. I thought, what did I do? I should be back home picking lettuce," but unfortunately he was wounded. He lost an eye. and he talks about when he returned to California, he started working the fields again, and he was in the fields picking. He's picking tomatoes or something, and the other workers, they told him, "Be careful. The immigration people, we heard they're hanging around." And he said, "I don't care." He said he just wanted to be left alone. He'd been through Vietnam, and he wants them to get back to some kind of normal life. And he's talking on camera now, and he said, "Yeah, sure enough, immigration comes up and taps me on the shoulder. Hey, boy, papers." And they show a close-up of Charlie on this video, and he said, "Here's my papers, you son of a gun." And he pulls out his glass eye. So, but like I say, he describes about his friends, what happened when some of them didn't come back, and these other, as they call themselves Chicanos, they describe their experiences there, and it was pretty vivid, some of the things they've seen and the things that happened to them. But it's a video I highly recommend. And Charlie Trujillo, he went on to when he came back, he finished his education, and he's now a professor of sociology in one of the colleges in California. And it's just one of the several resources that people have to learn more about a little bit about contributions. In the Johnson County Community College, there's also a book in their library called Our Hispanic Roots. And I've been in communication with the author. He was actually born in Spain, but he's a trained historian. And when he moved to the United States, he realized, as a trained historian, there was just an awful lot that was not being told or taught in our schools, and there's a lot of it in that book. And for example, he talks about in 1776 when the 13 colonies, they were fighting for independence from England. After about a year, they were morale was declining. They were running out of money. Their uniforms needed to be replaced. Many of them had terrible equipment, and that's when Spain stepped up. Spain at that time controlled Mexico, Central America, and South America, and they lent the United States, I think, $4 or $5 million, and they had a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week bullet manufacturing company in Mexico City. And all of those bullets were heading for the United States for the 13 colonies, and they also later on provided cattle for food, and later on, Spain, their arch enemy was their arch rival was England, so they did not want England in North America, so they actually used ships, Spanish ships, to blockade English from anyway transporting arms or people. So anyway, there's those contributions, and Spain not only sent people from Mexico, soldiers, but there's a book supplied by the Department of Defense. It's in the lobby, but it showed Dominican soldiers in army outfits from the 1770s, and they're fighting for the United States. They show Indians from Mexico dressed in their military outfit. They're fighting for the United States. People, the blacks from Cuba and Puerto Rico, they're fighting for the United States. And in fact, some of the wealthy women from Cuba, they donated jewelry so the United States could purchase more armament. So there is some resources out there. There's quite a few videos available and books, and I think that would be a good way. And of course, our Hispanics, we are part of a lot of veterans organizations also. But the American GI Forum, that is pretty much the only one that's dedicated mostly to the Hispanic veteran. We have standing in Congress, nonprofit standing the same as the American Legion.
Okay, thank you. Roque Jr., what advice would you provide?
Well, if you know and see a vet, thank you. All I can say on that. That's one of the highest honors I guess I feel that you could receive, is somebody to acknowledge the fact that you were there.
Yeah, I would have to second that as well. Just the other day, I was thanking some veterans on Veterans Day, and you could clearly see that these guys had served in World War II and the later days, and also early in the Korean War. And then they turned and asked me if I had served, and they were just as humbled and just as thankful for my service in the Navy, you know, there in the first Gulf War and in the time shortly thereafter that. They were just as thankful for us on the ships as I was of them for boots on the ground. And so I would have to agree, it doesn't matter who they are. Don't judge a book by the cover. Learn as much as you can about history and how we've all played a big part of that, and also just stepping up and saying thank you. It's 1 in 10 people in the United States that serve in the military, and out of those, 40% are Hispanic Latinos. So please keep that in mind. And I would like to thank all of you for coming out today. I'd also like to thank the gentlemen of the panel and also Johnson County Community College and the Polsky series as well. Thank you very much. Gentlemen.
Thank you.
John, if you'd like to come back up.
I'm right here. Ladies and gentlemen, do we have any cards with any questions from the
Yeah,
audience?
give it to you, Dad, please.
Okay, gentlemen, a question from the audience. Did fellow soldiers discriminate against you while you served?
Well, like I said, I was, later on, 69, 72, discrimination was there, but it was nowhere near like it was in the earlier years. So, no, I didn't. We followed orders just like everybody else. And then, like I say, there wasn't no Hispanic officers, so, you just have to follow the orders, and they were pretty just.
Okay. The follow-up question was boot camp segregated during World War II and in Korea? Was boot camp segregated?
They have.
I don't recall any segregation in boot camp. We all, I believe we all felt we were all in this together, and I kind of really felt like like we were pulling for each other. And of course, after a few weeks, you really get on each other's nerves sometimes. It's a different life, and you have no control over your life really. So there's maybe some time tempers get short, but I really thought that everyone felt like they were part of a team.
Thank you. Another question. Do any of you gentlemen have concerns with the younger Latino and Hispanic perspective of what it means to be an American?
Oh, shoot.
I do, and whenever I can, I try to make them aware. There's a lot of people that went before them, like Rojas. They really worked very hard, and they went through a lot. And I tell them, things have not always been so easy. You really have to know more about your elders. And whenever I can, I bring that up. We had some people paved the way for us, and we really owe them a lot. And to act like like the world owes us a living, that has no place in our life.
Thank you.
Well, you know, I had talked to a friend of mine who was in the service with me, and he sent me an email. He lives in Tennessee. He sent me an email, and he said that and on the email he says, this is what a teacher's about. And beginning of the school year, she talked to the principal and everybody, and she had all the desks removed from their classroom. And all the children came in and says, well, where's the desk? And she says, well, can anybody tell me why you deserve this desk? Nobody could tell her. It went on for 2 days this way. On the third day, they came in and they asked the same question, and they said, well, we don't know. And they said, well, let me show you. At that point, she opened the door, and 27 servicemen came in and brought the desks in, one at a time. I said, they're the ones why you have the right to sit at these desks.
That kind of goes hand in hand with the next question. What advice would you give a Hispanic teenager determined to be in the military? I've been asked this question quite a bit, not only by, in my line of work as a military veterans and a veteran employment rep, but also my cousins have asked me this question. They, out of concern because of the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, I'm not sure if the person who wrote this is looking for advice to prevent them from going in the military, or if it's what kind of advice I would provide them if they're determined to be in the military. My advice to them would be the same advice to you. Look at the past. Look how far we've come because of the sacrifice of the people who've gone before us. If it wasn't for Roque and for Rudy and Roque Jr., you know, where would we be at this time? And if they're wanting to go in the military and you have hesitations against that, just know that each one of us is our own individual person, that we make our own decisions, that we have to live our own lives. And that for somebody who wants to serve in the military, it is something that is only given to a certain few people who hear the call of a higher calling, to be a part of something bigger than oneself. And as I mentioned before, only 1 in 10 Americans serve in the military, and it's a real honor to be a part of that. And so if you have a teenager who is looking to join the military, you know, go over the history with them, show them what accomplishments have been acquired through the military and through what the military strives to do. But more importantly, look back at the honor system, the honor code, the code of conduct that the military lives by. These are very, very strong family values that you hear politicians talk about all the time, but rarely do you see them actually put it into practice. So if you're looking for advice for a teenager that looks and that's going into the military, be positive, be encouraging, be supportive of them as a person, as an individual, and then go over the history and go over the honor code. The next one is a question to all of us. It said, and if I misread this, I apologize. Did you tough guys box at the Argentine Parish House or elsewhere? Go ahead.
You know, I didn't, but we did help a boxing club get active close to Strawberry Hill in Kansas City, Kansas. And now I know some of the guys who grew up in boxing. That is not there now, but that was a big part of the Argentine district in the 60s.
I was never at Argentine. I went to Armadale. They didn't have a boxing there.
This question's for Rudy. How did the American GI Forum come into being, and could you give a little bit more background on the American GI Forum?
Sure, thank you. Yes, actually, if you go to the internet and you type in American GI Forum, or there's a video, an hour-and-a-half video called Justice for My People. That is the story of our founder, Dr. Hector Garcia, and also the American GI Forum. There's also a 45-minute video in the library called American GI Forum, but like I say, Dr. Garcia, when he returned, he realized that the Mexican-American were not getting equal treatment. And this was in March of 1948, and he was having a kind of a difficult time selling this organization, because a lot of the veterans, they'd never belonged to an organization. They had no idea what it would do for them. And then in November of that year, 1948, a fella, his name was Felix Longoria from Texas. He died in the Pacific at the end of World War II, the last year of World War II. And in those years, it took a few years to return the bodies because there were so many. But they returned the body of Felix Longoria to a small town called Three Rivers, Texas. Well, the body was in the coffin, and the family, the small town, asked the ambulance to go to this funeral home. Well, they did, and the funeral home director, he came out on the porch, and he said, "I'm sorry, we can't accept the body." And I'm sure you've seen this on PBS before, but anyway, and of course the family, they were distraught. What do you mean? He has his uniform on. He died this country, and then he said, "I'm sorry, the whites probably wouldn't like it, so I don't want to get involved in that." So that's when they contacted Dr. Hector Garcia. And Dr. Hector Garcia, he knew Senator Lyndon Johnson, who had gone to be president, and Senator Johnson, he came to talk about this subject. And in fact, there was a cartoon in the New York Times showing the funeral director pointing to this coffin draped in an American flag. And but anyway, this brought the attention to what was happening to the Mexican American. So Lyndon Johnson, Senator, he told Dr. Garcia, "You know what? We can't change people's biases. Let's do him honors." And today he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Anyway, from there, several chapters began. They all had the same problems. I don't know if a lot of you knew or not, but our returning World War II veterans, they were not allowed to join American Legion posts. Why? Most of them were whites only clubs. A lot of people don't know that. So anyways, some of the veterans, they said, well, we'll start an American GI Forum chapter, our own clubhouse, and that's what happened. So little by little, that is what happened. They wanted to be like members of the American Legion. They wanted to have their own fraternity and get together on weekends and talk about the war and different things, just like any other veteran. So, but anyway, it was very active and growing. But with as many organizations, the numbers decline. People, for some reason, don't want to join organizations anymore.
You're doing okay.
Thank you. The next question is for everybody. Thank you for being here to share your experiences of the service. Was it hard for you to come up here and talk about it at first? And when you came back from the war and your experiences, was it hard to talk about it then as well?
We never like to talk about what happened. That's something that we had to do. And as far as coming up here, I was unprepared.
Yeah, I did not return. There was no war when I returned, but I can remember Roque, Senior, when he said when he returned, he said, there was really no celebration for him. He said that maybe they did in other parts of the city, but no one came up and told me, thank you. And I don't know. It just I did not grow up in the Mexican neighborhood. in 1945 or 46. So I really don't know what happened, but he said that is something that he does not recall. No one saying, you know, I want to buy you a coffee or something. So they just pretty much just started trying to lead a normal life and without recognition.
Yeah, that's the same thing for me as well. When I got out of the Navy, the first Gulf War had just ended, and Operation Provide Comfort and some other operations were going on at the time. Even in the Navy, there's a type of isolation. I mean, I was on an aircraft carrier, and there were 6,000 people on this one ship with me, but there were times there when you felt alone on an island. There were times there when you could look out in every direction you look, there was nothing but water. And you could feel just as alone there as you would anywhere else. There are times there when I haven't opened up to my family or to my friends. There are still things that I won't talk about. The transition for me was a slow-going process. While I wasn't boots on the ground and seeing combat as Rocky Sr. here, there are still things that by law I can't talk about. But for the most part, like these other gentlemen, I tried to pick up and move forward and just have a normal life. And that's why thanking a vet for their service, just a simple comment like that and a simple handshake, can be very, very important and very welcoming to service members coming back. This question here is for the whole panel. Semper Fi, and thank you for your service. Transitioning from military to civilian life can be difficult. What kind of advice would you give to a veteran who just got out to accomplish a successful transition?
Keep your head up high and keep trying.
Yeah, you know, it took me several years, but I did start going to community college here, and I really found that was somewhat therapeutical. I met other folks who were in the service, and we hung together between classes and sometimes after classes. So I think it's important that you meet and speak or get to be on good terms with another person or several persons if you want or can join the American Legion. Although sometimes I'm not sure. We discussed this when I joined the American Legion, but I didn't feel welcome. I don't know what it is. I believe the people who operated were World War II veterans, and I don't know, they just didn't feel like we were on equal footing or something. But so although I was a member, I did not attend meetings. But for example, we do try to make it available, make our space available. If someone just out of the service, talk, maybe give them some suggestions or advice, or if they want advice. Sometimes they really don't want advice. They just want to talk, and we're always there for that. But I really believe it's important that they not isolate themselves. That they get out and not only meet with veterans, but people who have likewise interests.
Right, I agree with that. I think there is going to be a time of decompression, so to speak, once you leave the military. And if you're having difficulty transitioning out of the military into civilian life, there's several different organizations. Rudy had mentioned the VFW and American Legion. Where I work, the Veterans Employment Representatives, we're all military veterans, some of us disabled military veterans. And we can, if we can't help you, then we know people at the VA, we know people at the various organizations and veteran service organizations that can help you. We also I would also second the keeping your head high and keep pushing forward. It's a lot of that same mentality that you had in the military that's going to make you a success in the civilian life. The more I work and interact with employers around the Kansas City metro area, the things that they're looking for, the qualities they're looking for, is exactly the same qualities we had in the military. And the core values, the leadership traits, the honesty, integrity, stick-to-itiveness, dedication, dedication to duty. Those are the things that they're really looking for. But definitely don't isolate yourself. Seek out somebody, a fellow veteran, a religious leader, another member in the community, a family member, anybody. Get the conversation going and keep seeking out. If they're not able to help you out, find somebody else. And if anything, come see us at the different veteran service organizations. We'll be able to help you out. We have one last question, gentlemen.
I want to mention there is a post 213 in Argentine, Kansas City, Kansas. It wasn't meant to be all Hispanic, but as I mentioned before, after World War II, the veterans, they wanted to be part of the American Legion, but the American Legion in Argentina, they said, no, just whites. So they got together, they said, well, we'll form our own American Legion post. And that's what Post 213 is. It's very close to the railroad tracks, if you don't mind trains rumbling by. But they've been there for a long time, and if anyone wants to be part of that atmosphere, just let me know, and I will give you the phone number and the location.
Thank you very much. This last question says, what does the CV, in the Navy, what does CV followed by the numerical designation signify? That's a pretty easy question to answer. The Navy has its own language. It really does. The Navy does. The Navy designates everything: a bucket of paint, a uniform, and a ship. Everything has a letter and numerical value designation to it. The C stands for carrier. The V is actually for aircraft. The reason they don't use A is because A was actually used for heavy cruisers. So a CA would be a heavy cruiser, a CV is an aircraft carrier. And SSN would be a submarine, BB was battleship, a FF was a frigate, FFG, guided missile frigate. So they had all different types of letter and numerical designations. The numbers following it was the number assigned to the ship in the series of ships that were built in that style, that likelihood. So if it was an aircraft carrier like the one I was on, CV-59, the USS Forrestal is the official name of the ship. It was named after James V. Forrestal, who was the Secretary of the Navy during the Vietnam War, and during the World War II.
Okay.
And Mr. Forrestal had the ship named after him. And the other ships in that same class, the Forrestal class of aircraft carriers, had their own assigned numbers and their own assigned names. So CV-62, which is the USS Constellation, is the same class of aircraft carrier. It just built exactly the exact same way with the exact same capabilities, people that could be carried on there, amount of stores, amount of airplanes, amount of ordnance and weapons to be carried on there. The exact same everything, it's just a different designator. And the Navy does that with everything, even not just ourselves, but with other countries' ships and naval supplies. So even though the Russian Navy had their designation, we still reclassified it according to the Navy. So please don't get confused by it. Just know that everything, the Navy classifies everything by their own numerical and alphabetical classification. I do thank you for the questions. I thank you for your participation and your curiosity into what we have to offer. And again, please go up and thank a vet. I can see veterans here already, and that I've worked with or that I've helped assist with in the past. And it's a great honor to have served with you guys. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
At this time, this will be the conclusion of the program. I'd like to extend a very large thank you to the members of the panel, James Madril for mediating. We appreciate your services, and we look forward to meeting with you again. On behalf of Johnson County Community College and the Polsky series, we thank you for being out here tonight.